Thank you, Mr Rosendale. A pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I start by congratulating the member for North Antrim for securing this debate. I thought his speech was both passionate but indeed spot on in terms of analysis and indeed in presentation. He and I may disagree in many aspects, in particular on the Constitution, but on his analysis of the requirement for these buses to be made in the United Kingdom, we certainly are in agreement. It's not that long since we were promised a Brexit bonus and it was branded on the side of a bus. The irony is that the Brexit bonus is going to be that the bus is going to be imported from China, and that is simply scandalous. I'm advised by Unite the Union that there's a suggestion that the London buses being bought from China will be £100,000 cheaper than those that can be manufactured in Alexander Dennis Limited in Falkirk or indeed elsewhere. I think there's two aspects to that. First of all, there is the great danger, as the United States has correctly acted upon with regard to cars, that the market is being flooded to create a monopoly situation, to knock out any competition, and then you're left with whatever they'll charge you, because this is undercutting, and they are flooding in, as are manufactured motor vehicles. And indeed, the second aspect is, if the factories that currently exist are lost, then the cost to the taxpayer, as we've seen 40 years on in the miners' strike, the cost in terms of devastation to the communities, the cost in terms of unemployment benefit, the cost of all the social harms that go with it, are far, far greater. It's on that basis that we have to ensure that these orders stay in the United Kingdom. I would like to see them go to Alexander Dennis Limited, but I can appreciate that there are other factories in the United Kingdom, although not those that simply assemble buses that are made elsewhere. That is not acceptable, and those who are simply up front for Yutong or whatever are not UK-made buses. So that's the particular point I'd like to make, but I think there's an aspect to it, because it is about having to decarbonise, and this should be about a virtuous circle, because we do have to change. Global warming is happening. Although huge progress was made by the motor industry, and I recall arguments in the City of Edinburgh over the pollution that comes from diesel buses, it has reduced significantly. But there does come a time when we do have to recognise that our vehicles do have to transition over as we're changing our renewable energy over. I know that we are looking at electric buses. I actually argue, and I'll come on to argue, for hydrogen buses, which Alexander Dennis Limited manufacture. There's good reason for that. We do know that electric cars are coming in, but that it's one thing in the City of London. It's quite another in rural parts of Scotland. An electric car can be a considerable difficulty if you're travelling long distances, and not just the Highlands. In my own constituents of East Lothian, finding a charging station can be difficult. Buses are also in a difficult and different situation. I recall meeting a good friend of mine who was the managing director of Lothian Buses, and he made the point that they do have electric buses. They weren't particularly keen on them, as I'll explain, because they were double-axled. It made it difficult to go into certain routes. It certainly chewed up the road. He also anecdotally and quite humorously pointed out that the Annandale Street depot at the top of Leith Walk, right in the heart of Edinburgh, he pointed out that if they charged every bus there, nobody in Leith would be able to boil a kettle. Such would be the drain upon the grid. So it's not so simple. But the particular point he made that struck home with me was he made the point that their buses go out at 6 in the morning and they return at 12 at night. They change drivers, the buses keep operating. They don't want those buses off the road for 2 hours or 3 hours. They can't afford that. They want those buses running. And that's why hydrogen is the fuel that he wanted. But of course it requires an infrastructure. You require to be able to refuel them. But hydrogen buses operate in Germany. Hydrogen buses operate in Aberdeen, probably in the City of London. They certainly operated in Glasgow. Alexander Dennis Limited is there. Scotland is decarbonising. Hydrogen is coming in. The National Grid electricity supply operator tell me that they anticipate 100% of green hydrogen to be manufactured in the UK will be manufactured in Scotland. It's not rocket science to begin to join the dots. Hydrogen's coming in. There's a plant going to Grangemouth, a stone's throw from Alexander Dennis Limited in Larbour. There's a hydrogen plant coming into my own constituency because there's a decarbonisation going on in the whisky sector. When I spoke to those bringing in the hydrogen factor, I said, will you have excess hydrogen? They said, yes. Could we use it for fuel? Absolutely. This is a more rural area that I live in, but it certainly makes smaller buses more affordable if you can have cheap energy that's being manufactured and otherwise going to waste. It's why in Orkney Islands they're looking at hydrogen-propelled ferries, because they've got so much hydrogen being manufactured on the island, they cannot get it off the island. So hydrogen is that fuel. But we have to have a virtuous circle. We do have to decarbonise. We do have to change and alter our society. But the new renewable future should not just be in terms of manufacturing, and the manufacturing basis we have a just transition. It should be ensuring that the fuel that we're blessed with in terms of cheap, available green hydrogen should be used in fuel buses that are manufactured here, preferably in Falkirk, but certainly elsewhere in the United Kingdom. That is a just transition. At the present moment, the purchasing of buses from China is an unjust transition, and indeed, as with what is happening in the North Sea, it is a sellout of those who have contributed to the economy of this country over years and who should be the basis of the new economy that we require to enter into.